So I am all done with just planning what I want to do for August, setting my intentions for August, sort of making a little minor plan of the books that I potentially want to read this month. It feels so good to be setting intentions and just making a small plan, a loose committing plan, because I am someone that gets very anxious when I may create plans and I feel like I have to stick to them, otherwise I'm horrible and I'm such a failure. No, we're not bringing that mentality into fall of 2024, nor going forward. Every time I create plans, I have the intention that they are very loose committing plans, nothing that I need to stick to, but here they are in case I am looking for something to do, in case I'm looking for something to read. Needless to say, it felt really good to just take a moment to write my intention, write what I want to bring forth this month, what I want to do for this month, what I want to read for this month, especially because I am such a fan of fall. I feel like most myself during the fall season. I truly feel it's because it's that time of the year where I feel the season is sort of aligning with the kind of energy that encompasses who I am, which is more of, I don't know, just slow and easeful and peaceful, and it's just a good rhythm. And I feel like personally my rhythm of who I am as a person is very much in alignment to the rhythm of fall, and I feel like that's why a lot of us love the fall season, because of that reason, because we feel like finally a season where our energy is attuning to the season's energy. So that being said, friends, I do want to share with you guys some of the books that I want to read this fall season. I know you guys see me write a few in my journal spread for the month of August, but I want to share some of the books that I'm planning to read for the fall season as a whole, because there's some good ones, you guys. I in general just love reading spooky books, but it's something about just reading spooky books during the spooky season just makes things come alive even more. So I'm excited to share this list with you guys. There is quite a few on here, so I'm gonna be jamming through them pretty quickly, not going too much in depth, and just giving you the overall synopsis of the book. Now, if you know me, like I mentioned, I mostly read spooky, thrillers, fantasy, dark romance types of books, so these are some of the themes in this curated list that I have for you guys. So without further ado, let's get into these book recommendations of books that I'm planning to read for the fall season this year. Now, if you know me, you know that I love a good graphic book. I love devouring graphic books. They're just so fun. It's so nice to look at illustrations paired with words. It's just, I love consuming a good graphic novel year round, but something about spooky graphic novels just really holds my attention. As a matter of fact, I think about maybe 80% of my graphic novel collection is spooky. So yeah, that's pretty much who I am. So I have 3 graphic novels that I'm planning to read this fall season. Starting with the first one is titled Hollow by Shannon Waters and Brandon Boyer White, illustrated by Bernice Nell. This sounds so good because it is sort of a contemporary retelling of Sleepy Hollow. I absolutely love the story of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman. I love watching the movies. I've never read the book, but I feel like this is going to be a great way for me to consume the story by it being a graphic novel. Now, in this story, we are following our main protagonist who recently moves to Sleepy Hollow, and I believe they end up making some friends, and somehow one of the friends is connected to the Sleepy Hollow legend, and then from there some weird things start happening. That's pretty much all I know, and it just sounds so good. Now, this next graphic novel is by one of my favorite authors, and when I discovered that they wrote a graphic novel, I was so taken aback because I've only read more anthology based books from them, and so I was very excited. That book is The Low, Low Woods by Carmen Maria Machado, who is also the author of Her Body and Other Parties, which is, if you haven't read it, masterpiece. It is so beautiful. I completely love that book. But Carmen Maria Machado also wrote The Low, Low Woods, which is a graphic novel, and I just, when I found out, you guys, I was so stoked. In this story, we are following, I believe, 2 friends or 2 sisters who in this world end up waking up one day in the movie theaters with their memories completely vanished, and I think that's because of some sort of illness that is going around in this world. What they wake up to is something very sinister and weird, and it just sounds so good. Now, if you've read anything from Carmen Maria Machado, you know that the writing is very lyrical, very just atmospheric and beautiful, so I'm very excited to see maybe that sort of writing style being represented in a graphic novel format. So I'm excited for that one. And the last graphic novel that I want to recommend is titled The Harrowing by Kristen Kiesling, illustrated by Rai Hickman. This story basically follows our main protagonist who is having visions, and the visions sort of start getting more and more intense, and no one knows about these visions. One day when I believe she's working up the courage to tell her family or to tell someone, she ends up being kidnapped and taken to this facility, and things just go south from there. I think in this world there are people who are called the Harrows. Apparently these people are very murderous people, and our main character is apparently a Harrow. I'm excited to see if she's a lunatic or not. Alright, so those are the 3 graphic novels that I'm planning on reading for this fall season. Of course, when it comes to graphic novels, I can consume a lot more. So most likely my graphic novel list for the fall season is going to increase. So these are just 3 of the books that I'm going to start this fall season with. Now moving on to middle grade. Yes, friends, I am a 30-something-year-old that reads middle grade, because what gets more magical and gets us connected to our inner child than reading middle grade? I love a good middle grade novel, and the first one that I want to read this fall season, because I cannot believe that I haven't read this, is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I actually thrifted this copy for $4. It's in pretty okay condition. It had a little just bent here, but other than that, it's good. And I also already borrowed the audiobook on my Libby account, so it's gonna be nicely paired with this book. This is actually a book that's on my August TBR, so I'm excited to read this book this month. And in this book, we are following our main character, who I believe is an orphan, and he lives in the graveyard. And he's pretty much being raised by ghosts and other creatures. Our main protagonist pretty much has to come face to face with the real dangers, which the real dangers are in the real world, not in the magical world. Of course, the real dangers are in the real world, because what dangers could possibly be in the magical world, right? I've never actually read anything by Neil Gaiman, and I cannot believe I haven't. I have watched some of the series adaptations for some of their previous works, but I've never read one of their books, so I'm excited to start off my Neil Gaiman journey with The Graveyard Book. Moving on to the next middle grade that I want to read this fall season is actually the second installation of the first book that I read last year, which is The Mystery of Black Hollow Lane. This is the first book, and this is the second one, which is The Secret of Whitestone Gate. This is a cozy middle grade dark academia sort of murder mystery series that I fell in love with the first book last year. It was so cute. I absolutely loved it. It takes place in an academic setting. We are following our main protagonist, who goes to a boarding school, and she's being raised by her single mother, and her single mother is very busy all the time, so she sends her off to a boarding school, which just happens to be the same boarding school that her dad went to. Her dad that very much went missing a few years back. So while our main character is at this boarding school where her dad attended, she ends up finding some very disturbing secrets about her father and a secret society that might have something to do with his disappearance. I'm so excited to revisit this world, this story, this fall season. I intentionally waited to read the second installation for this season, because spooky dark academia books during the spooky season, come on, nothing gets better than that. I forgot to mention that these are by Julia Nobel, and look at these covers, so cute, you guys. The next middle grade book I'm going to be reading this fall season is titled The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. I particularly added this book to my TBR because I am such a huge fan of Over the Garden Wall. If you haven't seen Over the Garden Wall, which is an animated series, you need to watch that series this fall season. It is everything. It is eerie, it is moody, it is autumnal, it is magical. I love it. So I have been trying to read more books that sort of encompass the vibes of Over the Garden Wall, and I ended up coming across this book right here. In this particular book, we are following our main protagonist, who is a 12-year-old boy who is mourning the loss of his mom. And the way that he has been sort of mourning the loss of his mom is by just reading a lot, getting wrapped up in stories and reading all kinds of books, any books that he can get his hands into. All of that reading, or all of these books that he has started to read, have sort of started whispering to him. Those whispers have sort of turned into him stepping into this other realm where there is magic and monsters and villains and an evil king. So our main protagonist is very violently propelled into this world. He sort of has to navigate this world and try to get himself out of it. I've read that this book beautifully captures what the meaning of loss is and how many of us tend to deal with loss, so I am very excited to read this book. The next middle grade that I'm planning to read this fall season is titled The Haunting of Evelyn Jones by Phil Hickens and illustrated by Keith Robinson. And look at this cover, you guys. Isn't it so fall and autumnal? It's giving all of the cozy and fall vibes. I love just looking at beautiful covers like this. In this story, we are following our main character who comes across this old book, and this old book has some very ghostly, chilling stories in there, and it just so happens that this book belonged to someone who disappeared a while back. This person ended up disappearing and they never heard from them anymore. So our main character decides to take it upon herself to try and discover what happened to this person that ended up disappearing. All right, friends, so now moving on to YA and adult books that I plan to read for this fall season. Starting off with a book that I've been wanting to read forever, you guys. It is a very popular book, and I'm pretty sure most of you guys have probably already read this book, but I haven't, and that is the cult classic Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I've always had a fear of reading classic books because sometimes the verbiage in these books, my brain can't understand that sometimes, okay? It might be connected to my neurodivergence. Sometimes that's kind of what keeps me from reading cult classics or just classic books in general, because my comprehension when it comes to the verbiage in these texts, I just can't, okay? And so that sort of intimidates me. So I am trying this year, or at least this fall season, to read some cult classics, and I'm gonna start off with Frankenstein because I am very much aware of the story of Frankenstein, and so I feel like me already knowing this story will help me get through the book. And you know what, if all else fails, there's always the graphic novel, okay? I did find a graphic novel as well that I would be very much interested in reading, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, a dark graphic novel by Sergio A. Sierra and Maritzel Ribas, who is the illustrator. You can never go wrong with graphic novels. So if I'm still having a hard time with the verbiage when I'm reading Frankenstein this year or this fall season, I'm just gonna go ahead and pick up the graphic novel for this one. If you are unaware of the story of Frankenstein, this story follows our main character, whose name is Victor Frankenstein, who is a scientist. And Victor Frankenstein creates Frankenstein, who is a person composed of a variety of different body parts from different people who Victor Frankenstein brings to life through electricity. And then something happens where Victor Frankenstein abandons Frankenstein the monster, and so Frankenstein now has to get adapted to the world around him, even though he knows nothing of it. There's a lot of fear and rejection, and it is heartbreaking and it is sad, which are themes right up my alley. So I'm excited to read the book or the graphic novel at that. Now moving on to the next book I want to read. If you've seen my most recent vlog previous to this one, where I go thrift some spooky books, you've seen that I picked up this little gem here. This is The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. My French is horrible, most likely saying this wrong. You've seen that I picked this up for only $2, you guys. I have seen the motion picture, but it's been so long, and like I mentioned, I do want to read some classics this fall season, and I would consider this a classic. I haven't seen the movie in a long time, but I do remember snippets of the storyline, and I do remember the beautiful music in the movie. I'm gonna rewatch it this fall season. That's going to be on my movie TBR for the fall season. But I do also want to read this book for the fall season. If you are unfamiliar with what The Phantom of the Opera is about, this follows a very gifted singer who sings at the Paris Opera. This opera singer mentions that she is mentored by what she calls the angel of music, but to us they are known as the Phantom of the Opera. But this prodigy singer mentions that she is mentored by them as well as haunted by them. It is very eerie, or at least that's what I remember from the movie. It is very eerie. I love the setting. I love that it's in an opera house. I love that there's music in there. So I'm excited to read this fall season. The next book I'm planning to read is titled Modern and Divination by Isabel Agahanian. I've had this on my TBR since last year, but I couldn't get to it last year. This is a witchy book, which if you know that I love witchy books. It is more of an urban fantasy novel, which I'm not a huge fan of urban fantasy, but it sounds good to the point that I'm willing to give it a try. This follows our main protagonist, who is a witch who kind of lives a double life, living her very normal human life as well as contributing to her magical life and whatever that consists of, until one day I believe she notices that her magic is sort of not working properly, is sort of running out. That is because there's this other witch who is very much power hungry and is trying to steal all of the other witches' magic. And so that kind of pushes our main protagonist to make some very unexpected alliances in order to be able to combat this power hungry witch. And she finds herself taking refuge at a house full of peculiar witches. I am a sucker for a good witchy book when it is told good. I feel like lately I have not been having the best luck with witchy book. I don't know, something about them, at least the last couple that I've read, have just not been doing it for me. So I'm really trying to look for that witchy book that fills that little void in me that is craving just a good witchy atmospheric book. The next book that I'm planning on reading for the fall season is this little guy right here. This is titled Dark Harvest by Norman Patridge. I actually got this, what was it, last year, and I didn't get to it. The sticker here says that this is being made into a movie. I don't know if the movie's out already. Might be out because, like I mentioned, I got this last year. But look at that cover. It's just so spooky, and ooh, it's giving me all of the Halloween and fall vibes. So this takes place during Halloween in 1963, I believe, in the Midwest. And in this town, there is this creature known as the October Boy who goes around to sacrifice a human. And it happens every year, and it is some sort of ode to, I don't know, something that keeps this October Boy apparently alive. This year, our main protagonist is taking it upon himself to try and find this October Boy and beat him at his own game. Well, not beat him to unalive someone else, but to unalive the October Boy, so all of these yearly killings could stop. It sounds so haunting, it sounds so eerie, and I cannot wait to consume this. I'm most likely going to wait to read this until October because it just makes sense to read this in October, so I'm gonna hold off on this one until October. The next book I'm planning to read, which actually this is a book that I was planning to read earlier in the year, but I decided to hold off on it because it just made sense for me to read it during the fall season, and that is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. This is a vampire book, and this book I believe is sort of a retelling of the original classic Carmilla. Beautiful. I read Carmilla maybe like 2 years ago and I absolutely loved that book, but I believe this is sort of a retelling from Carmilla. This is more of a contemporary dark academia retelling of Carmilla, and it follows sort of the same storyline of Carmilla about a vampire named Carmilla who sort of lures this girl. Some stuff happened, they fall in love, and the cool thing about this one is that it is set in a spooky academic setting, which vampires, academic setting, dark, eerie, gothic, sign me up. Honestly, I think I might just read this one either this month. It wasn't on my list on my journal to read it this month, but I've been just holding off on reading this, so I might either read this month or I might hold off on it until September. But this is gonna get read. This is gonna get read this fall season. The next book that I want to read is titled My Darling Dreadful Thing by Johanna Van Veen. This is an adult horror novel. First and foremost, look at this cover, you guys. So creepy, so spooky, so beautiful. In this story, we're following our main protagonist who apparently can see ghosts, and in particular she has a ghost companion. And one day our main protagonist is invited to go to this creepy old manor. She's invited by this very wealthy person, and then as our main protagonist is at this manor, this very wealthy person ends up falling to their deathbed, and I believe now the death is being pinned on our main protagonist, but now our main protagonist is claiming that the spirit, which is the ghost that she could see, is the one to blame. I'm excited to see what this ends up being. A murderous ghost? Yeah, yeah, I think I want to read that this fall season. And the final book that I have on this list that I know you guys see me put in my journal spread for August, and that is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I have been wanting to read this book for such a long time. This was published in 1962. It sounds so good, you guys. And I've been telling myself for the last, I think, 2 years that I'm going to read this book during the fall season, and I am holding myself accountable this year that I must read it, whether it's in August, September, October, even November. I need to read this book this year. In this story, we are following, and I quote from the synopsis, a perverse, isolated, and possibly murderous family. That alone makes me want to read this book. Something's probably wrong with me to the fact that this will propel me to want to read this book, clearly. So the story is about this murderous family and the struggle and what sort of happens or unravels when a cousin of them apparently arrives at their estate. That's all I know about this book, and that alone just makes me want to read this story. All right, friends, those are some of the books that I'm planning to read this fall season. Of course, this TBR for me is going to be getting progressively bigger which I am not mad at, but also I know that I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I wish I could spend all my days just reading every second of my life, but that is not the case for me. So I'm gonna try and get to as many as I can. Let me know if you guys would like to see a part 2 to books that I'm planning to read this fall season, or books that I've read that I would recommend for you to read this fall season. I have some good recommendations, so let me know if you would like a separate video on that. I know that I've already been sprinkling a little bit of fall content, and I just cannot wait to be making more fall content. I think after this vlog, I'm going to start doing maybe some reading vlogs, as well as maybe some fall decorating, because in my brain we're already full on in the fall, even though the weather is not matching up to it at all. But you know, it's okay. We're creating the vibes for ourselves in order to feel like autumn is officially here, because that's what imagination is all about, right? So that is what I'm doing for myself right now. Let me know down in the comments below, friends, if you guys would read any of these books that I've recommended. Let me know if you have read them. Let me know what you thought about them, or let me know a good autumnal fall spooky book that you would recommend to me. As always, friends, remember that you can create the life that you want, because you so deserve it. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate your support. Please remember to like, subscribe, engage with my videos. It really goes a long way. I have a goal to hit 5,000 subscribers, or try to get as close to 5,000 subscribers this year. Your engagement with my videos really goes a long way. Again, friends, thank you so much for being here. I will be seeing you in a video very soon. Take care, and bye for now.